The only position on the Chicago Bears offense with any real question marks entering training camp is the offensive line, which could be really good this season or could have some problems that make life more difficult for Caleb Williams.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. On the show today, we look at what's in store for this Chicago Bears offensive line, where there's a lot of young talent on this roster that could pan out very well and put the Bears in a very comfortable position on the offensive line. And they also have some question marks in terms of player availability and reliability, and also an actual position battle. The only position battle, really the only starting job up for grabs in a truly open battle anywhere on this roster, at the center position. It's going to matter a lot for Caleb Williams. So we'll try and get a sense of kind of the boom or bust potential of this offensive line, depending on how things go, what kind of player development they're able to do, and how maybe some of the luck of the football gods maybe smiles their way over the course of this season. I think the biggest question, is sort of the center competition, because we don't know who the starter is going to be. But I think the more important issue on the offensive line, if we start looking at it from that perspective, to me is the guard positions. Not because we don't know who the starters are going to be, but because we don't always know whether those starters are or aren't going to be available week in and week out. In theory, if Tevin Jenkins at left guard and Nate Davis at right guard are fully healthy and playing up to their full potential, the Bears will have a really solid guard duo on this offensive line. We've seen Tevin Jenkins have stretches of play that you could argue have been, again, stretches of like Pro Bowl caliber guard play. Maybe that's a little bit exaggerated, but right, he's had really strong moments where he looks like a cornerstone piece of this offensive line for the short and long-term future. But there have also been a lot of stretches where he's injured and he's not available, and a different player is playing in his spot on the offensive line. And that's not necessarily his fault, per se. He's not getting injured on purpose or, putting himself in a position to get injured on purpose. But nonetheless, he's not a guy who's been reliable to play 16 games now 17 games in any year of his career. And now Nate Davis is developing a similar reputation, not purely for injury, as we kind of learned last season, but not always available nonetheless. Like, you look back at the last few seasons for both of these guys. Like this past year, 2023, Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins played 11 and 12 games respectively. And those weren't always at the exact same time either. There were very few games last season where the Bears had both of their starting guards healthy and on the field. Nate Davis was dealing with some off-field stuff as well that complicates things. And certainly, again, for him too, not his fault. Neither of these players am I sitting here going, man, they really need him to be better, or need him to do something totally different. Not necessarily. You just need, some of this is luck. Players get injured, and there's not a lot. You can't prevent injuries in football. You can only try and minimize them and mitigate them a little bit and have backup plans when these guys aren't available. But across Jenkins' career, started 12 games last year, 13 the year before that, and then as a rookie, he was in there for 6 games on and off. Okay, his rookie season, you're not always expecting a guy to take over as a starter and start every game. So you can kind of excuse the first year, but the 2 years where he's been called upon to be a starter, a key piece of this offensive line at right guard and then left guard, 13 games, 12 games. That's still, 2/3 of the season-ish, but what about that other third? Especially when your guard on the other side, Nate Davis, is also giving you about 2/3 of a season. 11 games this past year with the Bears, But before that, his last season with the Tennessee Titans, he played 12 games. I believe it was just an injury situation there. The year before that, it was only 14, but he did play a full 16-game season back in 2020. So it's not as though he's never done it. He just hasn't done it in the last 3 seasons. And then we fast forward to this offseason so far with minicamp and OTAs, and he's again missing some practices. We don't know exactly how many. We don't know exactly for how long or why as a result. But nonetheless, again, questions of Nate Davis's availability. Tevin Jenkins seems to be healthy, and I think for the second straight offseason, we're getting positive stories about Jenkins doing different things with his body to try and prevent injuries and trying to take better care of his body or stretch or work out in different ways to be more durable. But again, we did hear that last offseason. He said he started doing Pilates to try and prevent injuries and still was injured. And again, not his fault, but the point being, like, we can't just trust that, Tevin Jenkins for sure has cured all injury bug and will never be injured ever again. Like, that's not realistic either. You just got to hope that with both of these guards, their injuries are minimum, for not super long and maybe not at the same time and not that serious. And you can have, if you could get 15 games out of both of those guys, say they even both missed 2 games this season, that sucks. You don't want to be without your starting guards for 2 games, but if you could get 15 out of both of those guys, you could have a really strong offensive line here. And if those guys play 10 games each and miss almost half the season, then miss 7 games each, like, you could have some real struggles on the offensive line. And then a lot of your confidence or lack thereof in this offensive line would then come down to your offensive line depth. Who's filling in at guard then for either of those guys? Is it Ryan Bates moving over from the center position? They signed Matt Pryor as a free agent from the San Francisco 49ers, who's made some starts at guard and tackle before. They've got Ja'Tari Carter, who filled in last season when there were injuries there. I mean, they have options, but how confident are you in an offensive line if you have to start Ja'Tari Carter at guard? Or if you have to start Matt Pryor at guard? I mean, you're a lot less sure about the kind of protection Caleb Williams is going to have in front of him when that's going to be so critical for his own individual development and success. Like, this offensive line needs to be as solid as possible, and there's wiggle room on that solidification, right? It's if Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins are healthy, but if they're not, it's a lot harder to be confident in this offensive line, and that's where it's kind of a volatile type of situation entering this part of the training camp calendar. Like, can these guys get through training camp healthy, really build that kind of strong foundation for durability for the rest of the season and ride this out well? Or are we going to have the availability issues start like they did, I think, last training camp? Nate Davis was in and out of the lineup a little bit early on in that process too, and that lingered over in the regular season and caused more and more problems. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on with the guards, especially as your 3rd-round pick, Karan Amagashi from Yale, starts training camp on the non-football injury list officially. Still don't have a reported concrete update from the Bears on, is that just a continuation of the thing he's been recovering from this whole time? And then did his recovery slow down? Was it not on the right track? Was there a setback? I mean, we don't know those answers yet. Hopefully we'll get some of those in the coming days and weeks here as the veterans report to training camp later this week. We'll also then get an update on the battle at center, where it's another question mark. Maybe there's less overall to be concerned about because you feel like you got a couple of decent options there, but still, nonetheless, we don't know who's going to be snapping the ball to Caleb Williams week 1, and you'd like to have that relationship as fleshed out as possible. So we'll kind of go through what we can expect from that battle and what level of confidence we should have or shouldn't have in Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton as the 2 options there. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is sponsored by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because they have the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. I'm on LinkedIn. I would bet you're on LinkedIn. And if you're not, a lot of your friends, family members, and coworkers are all on LinkedIn. So it makes it the best place to post a job because it's not just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who might not be actively searching for a new job, but could be open if it's the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours on LinkedIn. So hire professionals like a professional with LinkedIn. To post your job for free, go to linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. They say when you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one, but when you have two centers, do you maybe have two centers? I mean, both Ryan Bates and Coleman Shelton have started games in the NFL at center before and on the offensive line at multiple spots, at least for Ryan Bates. Both guys have some real experience and value here, and it is truly an open competition, but it also doesn't feel like either one of them is a surefire, like you're really happy to have this guy as your center because he's one of the best centers in football or whatever, or because you feel like he's really going to lock down and settle the position, right? It feels like both guys maybe have a somewhat limited ceiling as your starting center, given what we've seen from them in their careers. Like Coleman Shelton has been, I think, an average NFL starting center the last couple of seasons with the Los Angeles Rams. I think there's a reason, though, that the Rams didn't bring him back and that he was available for the Bears on a cheap one-year deal. You know, this was not a in-demand center that every team wanted to sign to make their starting center. And yet at the same time, it's not like Ryan Bates is this perfect solution either. He was a backup for the Buffalo Bills when Ryan Poles traded a 5th-round pick for him this offseason. And the Bears still went out and signed Coleman Shelton afterward, right? Like, they went and got another center after they traded for Ryan Bates. Not exactly this ringing endorsement of him as the surefire, can't-miss center that's going to lock down the middle of this Bears offensive line. And so you can kind of see reason to be skeptical about each one, and the idea being that, you know, the competition will bring the best out of both of them, but what if the best out of both of them is just okay? I mean, is that enough? I mean, I think part of this ties into the rest of the offensive line, right? Like, if Ryan Bates wins the center battle and is just okay, that's fine if Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis are playing 17 games and playing really well. Like, you can totally get by with Ryan Bates being okay or Coleman Shelton being okay when the rest of your offensive line is Braxton Jones, Tevin Jenkins, Nate Davis, Darnell Wright. Like, that group of five, if your center is your worst player in that mix because everyone else is healthy and playing well, you should be doing pretty well as an offensive line. You should be sitting pretty good. Caleb Williams getting some good protection, running game opening things up quite a bit on the ground. Like, that all could be fine. But if you start to add, okay, maybe you got a couple of questions or just some up and down from whoever starts at center, and you're missing a guard or a tackle or something, then you start to have multiple problems that layer on here. Because, like, if you look back at what these centers have done recently in their careers, right? They're not stalwarts that are just foundational cornerstones of their respective offensive lines, right? Coleman Shelton started every game for the Rams last season, 17, so, like, there's a reliability and dependability there. But again, they wanted to upgrade the center position this offseason and chose to move on from Coleman Shelton, right? Like, that was a position that they wanted to try and get maybe some better play from, because it wasn't a financial thing with Shelton. Certainly he was available to come back, but the Rams said, okay, let's go in another direction to try and make that position better. So you're getting kind of the Rams cast off there, but this was really his first full season as a starter. Took over and was the starter for a lot of 2022 as well, but, like, prior to that was always a backup in his career. So there's not this long established track record of just how good or I guess not, or how not good Coleman Shelton could be. I mean, there's a chance coming to the Bears and playing with Chris Morgan and getting a different kind of coaching and a different kind of offense. I mean, I guess it's the same style of offense, but, you know, sometimes a change of scenery can help a player take a big step forward, and sometimes a change of scenery can help a player take a step back, like we saw Nate Davis last season. So, like, Shelton has some lingering, we'll see how good he ends up being. And then Ryan Bates, like we said, was a backup all of last season for the Bills, did not start a game last season for them. But 2 years ago, 2022, started 15 games and is filled in games at left guard, right guard, and center. Like, he's got the positional versatility. But really, like, that 2022 season just 2 years ago is his one big season as a starter. He filled in as a backup in 2021 a few times and started a couple games that year. And, like, again, he's spot snaps played well when he's gotten the opportunity to. But he's not a proven commodity starting center. Again, otherwise he may have been starting for the Buffalo Bills, or that the Bills wouldn't have wanted to give him up for a 5th-round pick. Like, 5th-round pick was good value for a backup offensive lineman, but he was a backup for a reason, right? So you got a high-quality backup and an average to maybe below average starter in Coleman Shelton, who his previous team didn't seem to want to retain his services. And like, does that competition produce one really good starting center? Probably not. Can it produce one 17-game starting center who you know is going to be out there every week, even if he's going to get beat sometimes and make some mistakes sometimes? I think that's a realistic expectation, that one of these two guys will win the job and hold the job down, and not like the worst case scenario here, I think, is say Ryan Bates wins the battle. He's your week 1 center. But by week 6 or week 8, you got some bad snaps and some penalties and some missed assignments, and the Bears say, all right, we're making the change. We're benching him and starting the backup, in this case, Coleman Shelton. And then that's another center quarterback exchange for Caleb Williams to learn. It's another voice making the calls to the line of scrimmage for the rest of the offensive linemen to learn. Like, I really want the center position to be stable. Doesn't have to be great. Just needs to be stable. And I want whoever wins this competition to win it quickly and hold on to that job over the course of the full season, so that Caleb Williams can spend as much of training camp as possible taking those snaps from that center, building that relationship, so that the rest of the offensive line can build that relationship, especially the two guards next to him can kind of get used to, okay, how does he handle certain blocks? How are we comboing blocks up the middle and running plays and stuff? Like, how are we calling different protections when we're sliding? How much space do I have to give him? Like, there's a lot of different intricacies and nuances to the cohesion and communication that comes with the offensive line. And the center is the one who's really at the middle of it. So we said it on the front end this offseason, entering free agency in the draft. Like, we really wanted to like solidify the center position with one really solid name. And I don't like the approach of having a competition at this position in particular. I mean, if the plan was trade for Ryan Bates, then I would rather have a competition with Ryan Bates than no competition for Ryan Bates. Like, I do think if the plan is go cheap, kind of, I mean, it's not cheap because the owners are cheap in terms of like don't want to spend money, but just you couldn't spend a bunch of free agent dollars at every position, and they chose to go, let's say, affordable at center instead of top tier center. Well, this is kind of what you're gonna get then, and okay, it's not ideal, and maybe I'm putting too much stock in that quarterback center relationship, and that maybe it's a little bit more interchangeable. But I just, with Caleb Williams, like, the most important thing this season is his development. And that means having this offensive line give him time to throw and not lead him to making bad habits. And I do think the most important individual offensive lineman for that will be the center. Like, obviously, like, other players are also very important, but like blindside tackle is important, obviously. Like, but like the center and the communication, everything there for Caleb's year 1 development is really going to be critical. That's right in front of his face. Like, even if you got a bad tackle, like, it's easier to flush the pocket one side or the other, but like, if you have a bad center, I mean, shoot, we saw it with Lucas Patrick the last couple of seasons, really, like, it can make such a significant impact on this offensive line. And so we have to just hope that the coaching and the development and this competition produces a reliable, consistent, stable starting center, and that the Bears can ride that out over the course of the season, especially if there's going to be any instability at the guard positions next to center. We're also going to need to see more development from the young offensive tackles. Plenty of reason to be confident in them, and I think certainly it's the position group on the offensive line I have the most confidence in at this point. So then it's about coaching and players getting better over the course of the season. So we'll kind of go through what we want to see from Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright throughout this player development process next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. We may be in a slower part of the year for sports right now, but that doesn't mean FanDuel slows down at all. You can bet on, of course, the baseball season going on right now, golf, tennis, soccer, still plenty of sports, but then also you can look ahead to this upcoming football season. You can bet on Bears-Titans Week 1, where the Bears are, I think, a 4.5-point favorite as that line has moved towards them. You can bet on Caleb Williams' odds for Offensive Rookie of the Year, Rome Odunze's receiving yards as a rookie, Matt Eberflus as Coach of the Year, and so much more. The best part is, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every day, all summer long. That's right, there's something for everyone daily throughout the summer to get you all the way back to football season. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The Chicago Bears will need both of their young offensive tackles to take a step forward this season. Their development is going to be really critical to the success of this offensive line as a whole, and then into the success of Caleb Williams, and then, of course, the offense as a whole, holding down both sides of the pocket so that Caleb Williams has some room and doesn't have to scramble around so much the way he did at USC. And I think for both Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, there's still a certain level of patience and benefit of the doubt that they're allowed to have. But I think, as Braxton enters year 3, you start to turn that down just a little bit more and more, right? Like, okay, by year 3, you should start to be pretty close to what you're going to be as an NFL starting tackle, right? Like year 1, he's a rookie 5th round pick starting in the NFL, out of Southern Utah. So we could be very patient with him and understand that there are some penalties, getting beaten, some mistakes sometimes. All right, it's fine. He's a rookie 5th round pick. We can't have super high expectations. Let's see this through so we can kind of accelerate that development when the team is actually ready to compete as we get closer to now. Year 2, it's like, okay, we're seeing some progress. Also got hurt and missed some games in that process. Only played 11 games last season, so you'd like to see him get back to the durability we saw his rookie season. But it was kind of hard to measure some of that growth and progress when injuries play a role in that. You wonder, is he fully healthy? As we're seeing, we're seeing the best version of Braxton Jones right now. But now it's like year 3, okay, you've had the same offensive line coach now for 3 seasons. It's a new offense, but same offensive line coach. You've seen all the best pass rushers that you're going to face, in the NFL. Maybe not literally all of them, but like you've seen top quality NFL pass rushers. No one's going to throw something super brand new at you as a left tackle that you shouldn't have already been prepared for. You don't have the inexperienced excuse if you have mistakes and penalties. Like it's starting to get to be like go time for Braxton Jones. And they drafted a left tackle in the 3rd round. I think that sends some kind of message of, hey, if you don't, we got a long-term plan to replace you. As long as Braxton Jones keeps improving on the trajectory that, a normal development of an offensive lineman, he should be fine, and he'll hold off Karan Amagaji, and Karan might have to play a different position because Braxton Jones can get a nice contract and be your left tackle for the next 5 years. Like, sure, that's absolutely one of the outcomes here. But the Bears draft a 3rd-round offensive tackle and say, all right, Braxton, let's go. Like, it's not really an open competition for the left tackle spot. Amagaji's on the non-football injury list anyway. He couldn't compete right now if he wanted to. But, like, the Bears kind of said in the front end, Amagaji, probably a backup as a rookie. Swing tackle, they called him right away from the get-go. So it's not breathing down Braxton Jones's neck yet. But it is an insurance policy for the long term if, for some reason, he doesn't make that much progress here. And I think he will continue to get better. And I think we'll go into next offseason having that kind of question again where it's like, okay, Braxton Jones was fine. Could you do better? Yeah. If there's an offensive tackle there in the 1st round, are you going to pass on him because Braxton Jones is so good? Probably not. But at the same time, you might have other bigger needs you want to address. You're not necessarily going to go out and spend top dollar on a left tackle when you already have Braxton Jones. Like he's pretty good. Like he's fine. He's reliable so far at this point in his career. So I think we're going to kind of be in this left tackle, middle ground, nowhere zone of like, you could do better, but you don't need to upgrade it, but it'd be nice to upgrade it, but he is fine. So like it's kind of a luxury to upgrade it. And I think that's where we're going to end up with Braxton Jones. And that'll be interesting for contract negotiation talk at some time in the future when his rookie deal ends up and we're not sure, is he that good? I mean, he's good. Is he that good? We'll kind of have to figure that out. And hopefully we start to answer that a little bit more clearly this season. On the other hand, Darnell Wright at right tackle still gets more of that, young player patience. Like he's a top 10 pick, so he gets less of it, but it is only year 2. We cannot expect Darnell Wright to enter in year 2 as a finished product at right tackle. We should expect Darnell Wright to get better, be a better player this season than he was last season, make fewer mistakes. There were some of those times when there's a mental lapse here or there or a poor technique on a play where he just needs to keep his pad level better or not lunge with his hands or whatever the thing might be. Like those were totally understandable even for a 1st round pick as a rookie. Like rookies are going to make those mistakes. But now in 2024, like this was a top 10 pick. Like we need to see a top 10 pick level offensive tackle over the course of this season. That doesn't mean he has to make the Pro Bowl. It doesn't mean he has to be a dominant player from week 1 to week 17, but like, let's see more of that come to fruition. Let's see him look more like a top 10 pick and give you that confidence like, oh yeah, the Bears nailed that pick. They got that right tackle that's really going to lock things down. So far, so good. Like I don't think there's any room to complain about what we've gotten from Darnell Wright, but that doesn't mean we don't need to still see that normal sort of progression. Like I don't want to see a sophomore slump from a top 10 pick. Like it's just not, there's too much invested in him, and he's getting, again, the same kind of coaching staff, the same process here. Like in theory, we should see Darnell Wright start to get better. And of course, it can get more complicated if they have to change the right guard spot over the course of the season, if Nate Davis isn't available. Same for Braxton Jones at left tackle, if Tevin Jenkins has an injury. Like it makes the tackle's job harder when either the guard gets worse or the guard is constantly changing who you're working next to and trying to work through that communication of when you're picking up or passing off stunts and when you're combo blocking in the running game and some of the things we talked about earlier from the center position. So hopefully the Bears can have all 5 of their offensive linemen locked in for as many games as possible. And if Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright get a little bit better, and Tevin Jenkins and Nate Davis stay healthy and play up to their standard, and somebody wins the center competition and holds that job down, the Bears should have a pretty good offensive line there. Like, not top 5. No one's going to say they're the best group in the NFL, but, in that 15-ish range, 12 to 15 kind of range, absolutely. That's where this offensive line could be. On the other hand, if Darnell Wright has a sophomore slump and Braxton Jones doesn't really make any progress, and then your guards are in and out of the lineup and your center competition didn't produce a very good starter, like you could see this offensive line having problems at multiple spots. It seems unlikely that all of those things are going to go wrong. It also seems unlikely that all the things are going to go right. It's like some combination of things are going to go right and go wrong. I'm guessing Darnell Wright's going to take a big step forward. Maybe Braxton Jones doesn't take a big step forward, but certainly doesn't take a step backwards. Maybe one of your guards is there for all 17 games and plays well, and maybe one of your other guards is still dealing with injury issues. And maybe your center is just fine. And I think we're going to have a mix of like some of the good outcomes happen and some of the bad outcomes happen. And this Bears offensive line is okay. It's all right. And maybe hopefully just good enough to get the job done is where it's the bare minimum we need. And that's hopefully not too out of reach for this group. I'd be curious to hear your level of confidence in this Bears offensive line. Let us know in the comments here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, or you can tweet us at Locked On Bears or post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming back tomorrow as we keep getting you ready for training camp with veterans reporting on Friday. And of course, you got to come back for your next opportunity to bear down.